Hey guys, Mr. Titan here, and today I'm making the half-heartedly promised follow-up to the movie-length video where I ranked every episode of SpongeBob from the first 5 seasons. That's right, I'm ranking every episode of SpongeBob Season 6. Now, the general consensus among fans is that the first 3 seasons in the movie were golden, seasons 4 and 5 weren't bad but weren't nearly as good as pre-movie, and that season 6 started the garbage era. And while I sort of agree just based off of memory of some of the more infamous episodes that come from this season, I don't think it'd be fair to call it completely bad without looking at each episode like I did with the 5 seasons before it, especially considering that first ranking video took damn near a year to fully produce, meaning it's been about that long since I've seen a good chunk of post-season 5. I will also be updating my overall ranking from the first 5 seasons to include these season 6 episodes. Now, without further ado, sit back, relax, have fun eating your chum while washing it down with an ice cold root beer, and get ready for every episode of SpongeBob Season 6, Ranked. At number 47, we have what is, in my opinion, the worst episode of SpongeBob Season 6, The Splinter. So, this episode has been talked to death, and for good reason. SpongeBob gets a splinter in his thumb, leading to some of the most grotesque imagery to come from the show up to that point, especially when Patrick shows up only to make it worse. Also, this was around the point where Squidward torture became more unnecessarily common. They literally just throw it in there as an ending joke, putting it under a flea in her dome. This was definitely worse than anything from the first 5 seasons. Next, we have Cephalopod Lodge. In this episode, we find out that Squidward goes to the Cephalopod Lodge on the 3rd Wednesday of every month, which is pretty much a place where other octopi, squid, etc. have get-togethers and host ceremonies. Well, after a couple minutes of seeing how much joy this club brings Squidward, SpongeBob and Patrick get him kicked out due to following him into the secret club. And after fucking up the apology to let him back in and making Squidward miserable to the point of tears, they try to cheer him up by torturing him via a jellyfish sting. Then they actually make themselves useful by covering themselves with a photorealistic sock and pretending to be a giant albino eel to scare the lodge members and give Squidward the opportunity to defeat the eel and get accepted back into the club. And if the episode ended there, it wouldn't be a whole lot better, but still be passable. But no, SpongeBob and Patrick reveal their plan in front of the lodge members, getting Squidward kicked out again, and this leads to the ending of Squidward getting tortured some more via another jellyfish sting to the fucking tongue, also putting this one under a flea in her dome. Nearly every minute of this episode was just physical and emotional torture to Squidward, and it wasn't fun to watch. Boating buddies. A common complaint with season 6 is SpongeBob's design flanderization, but it's definitely most apparent here. He just looks so stupid and unappealing, and it's pretty damn fitting as his portrayal this episode is just that, stupid and unappealing. He lands Squidward in boating school by frustrating and chasing him into driving off in a hurry, causing him to hit a stop sign, and further obsesses over Squidward when he's at the boating school in a way that comes off as he wants to wear Squidward's skin. Also, it was a big missed opportunity to not have a Squidward and Mrs. Puff team up, considering how much they both can't stand SpongeBob. Could have made this a much more interesting watch. But yeah, putting this under a flea in her dome, as this is also much worse than anything to come from the first 5 seasons. Choir Boys. This is just a slow and boring mess of an episode that makes me perfectly understand why many consider season 6 to be the first bad season of the show. It's jam-packed with Squidward torture, off-key singing, annoying facial expressions that don't fit the style of the show, and an ending that gives a fuck you to Squidward, putting it under all that glitters. Next is Giant Squidward. The concept of Squidward becoming giant sounds interesting on paper, but they only really use it as a vessel for SpongeBob and Patrick to annoy Squidward and for him to be made miserable to the point of tears, also putting it under all that glitters.
This is really fun.
I know!
Plankton's regular. Mr. Krabs losing his shit over Plankton getting just one customer felt out of touch with his character pre this season. Like, yeah, he's always been money hungry, sometimes to the point of doing something irrational, but this is obsessiveness he hasn't really displayed before this episode. Also, it turns out Plankton never truly had a loyal customer, and it was just Karen paying this poor guy to make himself sick eating Plankton's chum so he'd stop complaining about his failing business, putting it below below all that glitters. Just not a satisfying episode. Pineapple Fever. The concept of Squidward being trapped with SpongeBob and Patrick in SpongeBob's pineapple during a bad tornado could have been interesting if it wasn't just so damn slow. The eyebrow rip also doesn't make me like this one more, putting it below all that glitters as well. I tried to like it, really I did. And as a kid, I think I liked it much more. But as of today, I just don't. The Clash of Triton. This was a pretty bad waste of a special. We find out that King Neptune has a son named Triton, and nothing of substance really happens beyond that. And the false advertising made it seem like SpongeBob and Triton were going to fight, but they didn't, putting it right under the Battle of Bikini Bottom. This was definitely the worst special of the show thus far.
It's the SpongeBob special that will go down in history.
At number 39, we have Pet or Pests. Funny, worms have been a recurring species on the show since the beginning, yet they've never been designed so grotesquely before. Yeah, just a gross and at times dragged on episode that doesn't have much going on, putting it under Wigstruck. Dear Vikings. Yeah, this is a good contender for the most boring and pointless episode of the show. You'd think SpongeBob and Squidward getting kidnapped by Vikings would lead to more interesting moments, but they don't really do anything except stand around and talk for the most part. And what action there is, it's not all that action-packed. Also, this episode was nominated for an Emmy. Out of all SpongeBob episodes to release in 2008, I would not have chosen this one, putting it under Wigstruck.
Squidward, I'll be back in 1 hour. I'm going on my lunch break. Squidward?
Gone. SpongeBob being the only one left in Bikini Bottom could have been an interesting concept if it wasn't undermined by that mean-spirited revelation. National No SpongeBob Day? Yeah, this episode just sucks, putting it under Roll of Dumb. Squid's Visit. Remember how I said SpongeBob's portrayal in Boating Buddies made it seem like he wanted to wear Squidward's skin? Well, that's kind of the case here. He's so obsessed with Squidward that he was able to replicate every subtle detail of his house correctly. Creepy. Also, can I just say how unnecessary this episode is? It's literally stated that Squidward has never visited SpongeBob, and we're just supposed to believe he never once in 6 seasons visited SpongeBob's house, despite the fact he most certainly has. The only points this episode really wins with me is Squidward getting a good yet twisted ending despite his house burning down, putting it under Good Neighbors. Chum Caverns. I don't know. This episode was just incredibly forgettable to me. The only memorable part is these cave creatures, and that's not as much memorability as it is weirdness, putting it under Good Neighbors as well. Grooming Gary. This episode is just a worse version of The Great Snail Race. At least that episode was funny and memorable. This episode doesn't really cross my mind too often, honestly, putting it just under Rise and Shine. And that'll conclude the F tier. Entering the D tier, the first episode we have here is No Hat for Pat. This one is pretty weak to me. Patrick gets a job at the Krusty Krab so he can wear the hat like SpongeBob and Squidward, which causes him to lose balance and continuously fall after putting it on. And they repeat this gag for pretty much the remainder of the runtime. Like, we already have Big Pink Loser, and not only does Patrick maintain his balance with the hat on there, but that episode was infinitely funnier and more memorable. I do think the epilogue was sweet enough though, putting it under Rise and Shine. It's just mid. House Fancy, the first episode of season 6, and I think it was pretty good for what many consider to be the start of a downfall era. I like the House Fancy theme along with the shitty 2000 CGI to go with it, and it was nice to see Squilliam back as well as Squidward win against him in the end. But what in the Happy Tree Friends was that toenail scene? I still think the good outweighs the bad with this episode, but that fucking toenail scene, man. Putting it above Squidtastic Voyage. SpongeBob SquarePants versus the big one. This is another waste of a special, honestly. If I could describe the biggest problem, it's that stuff happens just for the sake of it happening, whether it goes with the pre-established continuity or not. Like, Squidward apparently doesn't know who Sandy is, despite having an episode where he got negatively impacted by one of her inventions and multiple interactions beyond that. The Flying Dutchman doesn't know who Mr. Krabs is, despite having made multiple deals with him in the past. And JKL telling SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward that one of them will be sacrificed sacrifice to which he eventually sacrifices himself only to be okay in the end. Like, it's cool he's fine, but why set up the stakes of a sacrifice and not follow through on it? The only positives this time around was the legendary Johnny Depp's guest role as JKL, the Davy Jones locker bit, and this mildly funny joke at the beginning.
Mr. Krabs, you didn't forget to pay the power bill again, did you?
Of course not. Here, just fan yourself with some of this junk mail I keep finding in me mailbox.
Putting it below Goo Goo Gas. Next is Chum Bucket Supreme. A Patrick and Plankton-based episode was fun and wasn't really utilized before this, at least not to the extent it was here, and led to some funny interactions.
What's that number before 1?
0.
Oh, right. Congratulations. You have 0 customers.
Putting it just above Hocus Pocus.
Chum is fun.
That'll help you get the formula.
Putting it above Pat No Pay. Toy Store of Doom. I don't care what anyone says, this episode's a classic, and it mainly comes down to the setting. SpongeBob and Patrick hiding in the toy store after closing, to which they start battling a toy robot in the most SpongeBob way possible after their imaginations run wild, causing them to think the toys are out to get them was a good enough concept. Putting it just under Nightlight, as like in that episode, SpongeBob and Patrick can both be too babyish at times. Patty Caper. This is another episode I forget 99% of the time. I think it has to do with the title. It's like a generic shortened version of the Great Patty Caper from the following season. But as for the plot, it was pretty convoluted, with Mr. Krabs pinning the blame on SpongeBob for stealing the secret formula, only to incriminate himself for having stolen it due to not wanting to pay. It's really displays like that remind me he sold SpongeBob's soul once. At least he got what was coming to him in the end. Also, Patrick's sketch of Squidward has been burnt into my mind for literal years, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Definitely my biggest takeaway from this episode. Putting it above Waiting. No Nose Nose. The plot of Patrick getting a nose surgically attached to his face to be like his friends and finding out about bad smells, driving him to be dickish, was a good enough conflict. But other than that, this episode's inoffensive at best. Putting it above Sing a Song of Patrick.
At least now that pink moron will leave us alone.
I heard that.
At number 24, we have Nautical Novice. This entry is brought to you by Shower in a Can. I get status quo and needing to keep Mrs. Puff on the show and all that, but what a cop-out of an ending, and it wasn't even a funny twist. At least it's not the worst Boeing School episode from the season, putting it above Band in Bikini Bottom. This entry has been brought to you by Shower in a Can. You stink. Penny Foolish. Considering how worked up Mr. Krabs got over a penny this episode, I wonder what his reaction would be to finding out the penny recently got discontinued. Putting it just above Picture Day.
Must just be the full moon. Wait a second.
Professor Squidward. Squidward stealing the identity of Squilliam to teach a prestigious music college was a fun take on a Squidward versus Squilliam story, though I kinda wish the background artist went more in on designing the music college. Like, nothing about this building looks prestigious or even like a college, and it's a big reason why I subscribe to Alex Bale's Squilliam theory. Also, pretty interesting how up to this point Squidward and Squilliam just keep outdoing each other. Like, Squidward won in Band Geeks, Squilliam won in Squilliam Returns, Squidward won in House Fancy, and Squilliam won here. Just something I took note of. Putting it above Picture Day. Suction Cup Symphony. In this episode, Squidward sets out to write a symphony, but because of SpongeBob and Patrick's annoying distractions, he writes said distractions into the symphony. I do love how, despite it, Squidward gets a standing ovation for it at the end. Putting it above Funny Pants. Spongicus. I love the setting of the Chum Coliseum and the action that went on there, and this was just a fun episode. Putting it above Pest of the West. And at the highlight of the D tier, we have this season's animated title card, The Krabby Chronicle. Mr. Krabs making a profit off of life-ruining stories about main and secondary characters like Sandy, Plankton, Mrs. Puff, and Larry made SpongeBob's eventual revenge so damn satisfying. Also, I'd like to think Mr. Krabs also got his comeuppance for printing off counterfeit money after the episode ended, putting it just under Jellyfish Hunter, as both those episodes show how low Mr. Krabs can go at times. And that concludes the D tier. Let's move on to the C tier. Starting off the C tier, we have the Slumber Party. The only thing I really liked here was the reused joke from No Weenies Allowed with the girly teen girl SpongeBob lookalike.
I am so doing Dr. Farawayville.
Who the heck is that?
I don't know, but she is ugly.
The root beer bit was gross and excessive, but other than that, this episode was alright. Putting it under the Two Faces of Squidward. Shell-shocked. The main highlights with this one were the inclusion of Angry Jack in his Shell Emporium, as well as his anger only being a character to make his commercials louder, only to understandably become actually angry when SpongeBob destroys all the shells. And the ending of Mr. Krabs giving Gary a shell worked well enough in solving the problem, even if it was pretty weird. Putting it above Muscle Bob Buff Pants. This is one of the best episodes to watch if you have as shitty money management as SpongeBob did this episode. Also, I love how chill and somewhat wise Patrick is at the end when SpongeBob apologizes to him. Harkens back to his season 1 personality before stupidity became his main trait.
There is no right or wrong when it comes to that stuff, SpongeBob. There just either is or there isn't.
Putting it above Slimy Dancing. I like this one quite a bit. The Card. As someone who collected Pokemon cards growing up, I've always been a fan of this episode. Sure, I get what people mean when they call it infuriating or some word like that, but Patrick giving the remaining Mermaid Man cards to SpongeBob after being driven to tears over the destruction of the seemingly only one in existence was a sweet ending. Also, the card itself is awesome.
Mermaid Man says, buy more cards!
Putting it above Breath of Fresh Squidward. Krabby Road. I like the premise of Plankton starting a band with SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward to steal the secret formula. But other than that, this episode doesn't do much to separate itself from ones like Bucket Sweet Bucket, honestly. And for that, I'm putting it just under that episode. Honorable mention to Buff Squidward. Sun Bleached. As someone once jokingly put it, this episode is reverse racism. Also, the cutaway to the hip young old folk from the soda commercial was an iconic bit, and definitely one of my favorite moments from the whole season.
It's radical! Radical! Drink it!
Putting it above The Big Switch. Single Cell Anniversary. I think this was the first real Plankton and Karen episode. I'm glad they used that episode format more later on. Plankton getting help from SpongeBob to give Karen an anniversary present was sweet, even if it was partly a secret formula scheme. Oh My Karen was definitely one of the best season 6 songs, though I think that's a given as I don't believe season 6 had that many songs anyway. Putting it just under No Free Rides. At number 11, we have Truth or Square. So, the 10-year anniversary special of SpongeBob. Yeah, people really don't like this episode, but I don't care. I love it for what it is. First, the visuals. To celebrate this grand milestone, this episode was produced in HD widescreen instead of the typical 4:3 standard quality. For reference, SpongeBob wouldn't permanently be produced in HD until season 9. This gives it more sharp and appealing colors and outlines, and is definitely the best season 6 episode to look at. As for the contents of the special, the patchy segment of him interacting with celebrities ran a little dry, but it was otherwise still charming. I love how they got LeBron James, Will Ferrell, and the late Robin Williams to be in this. And the musical number by Pink was good. As someone who's a fan of some of her songs, I approve. Also, I had no idea Triumph the Insult Comic Dog was a real thing outside the special until I looked him up out of curiosity. I seriously thought he was exclusive to the special. And the scene of Patchy getting knocked out and hallucinating himself meeting SpongeBob was decent foreshadowing for the 20-year anniversary special. And that's a good segue into SpongeBob. aka what we came here for! Our main 4 getting stuck in the freezer during the 117th anniversary of the Krusty Krab opening was a decent conflict for a special, and leads to them reminiscing on never before referenced stories of SpongeBob moving into his pineapple after it fell off a boat into the ocean, the Flash animated Krusty Krab commercial from the 50s, and SpongeBob and Sandy's wedding. I don't care what the episode wants us to believe, because it was a real priest who didn't know it was a play. SpongeBob and Sandy are canonically married. I can't help but wish they reminisced upon at least one pre-existing episode though. I personally would have had them call back to Help Wanted. Also, I've always wondered what the implications are with Mr. Krabs reappearing back with the gang out of nowhere after SpongeBob's flashback. But yeah, while I like this special more than the average SpongeBob fan, the Wii game with the same name I played as a kid is infinitely better, putting it above 2,000 Patties Under the Sea. At the surface, this seems like just another SpongeBob and Patrick annoy Squidward episode, but it gets better soon enough when Squidward becomes an absolute menace after beginning to have fun with the slide whistle. Reminds me of his performance in Squidville when he played with the reef blower. He didn't warrant the comeuppance of the slide whistle getting stuck in his throat after crashing the truck off the cliff though. Also, this episode introduced a banger of a recurring track, so I like this one very much, putting it above Ugh. Breaking into the single-digit ranking, we have Gullible Pants. This is the first post-season 5 episode I saw as a kid, and it might be nostalgia bias, but I really like this one. Mr. Krabs putting SpongeBob in charge after fucking his nail up, and Squidward using SpongeBob's gullibility to convince him to do things like put a customer in charge of making the Krabby Patties, as well as scatter trash all along the Krusty Krab to lower expectations to make the food seem better was satisfyingly entertaining. Putting it above Mermaid Man vs. SpongeBob. To SquarePants or not to SquarePants. All of SpongeBob's SquarePants getting ruined, leaving him to start wearing round pants was a fun and silly idea. And I love how it leads to SpongeBob reinventing himself after everyone jokingly, and in Patrick's case literally, doesn't recognize him due to the round pants. And Squidward taking advantage of SpongeBob's situation by basically turning SpongeBob into another version of himself to which they slack at work together made it more funny, putting it under culture shock. Next is Not Normal.
Hi, how are you?
I really love this episode. SpongeBob gradually becoming normal after Squidward snaps at him for, well, not being normal to the point of becoming too normal even for Squidward was a fun concept and really needed at this point in the show. I also relate to this episode heavily as SpongeBob is closer to who I actually am, while normal SpongeBob is how I try to conduct myself in public. Also, SpongeBob being unable to change back to not normal until Squidward shows up, having also become normal, scaring SpongeBob back to the way he's supposed to be, was a great ending, putting it just above the paper.
Thanks, buddy. You saved my life.
Wonderful weather we're having.
Overbooked. I feel like we can all relate to this one in some fashion. SpongeBob promises to be at Patrick's birthday party, help Mr. Krabs assemble a telescope, and be at Sandy's invention presentation all in the same night. So he goes back and forth between all places to not let anyone down. The highlight is when SpongeBob tells them his intentions of wanting to be there for all of them, to which Sandy uses her new invention to make clones of SpongeBob to help with everyone. I like this one quite a bit and shows that the season still has good episodes, putting it above Fools in April. A Life in a Day. I like the message of this episode. The cliche live every day like it's your last, but with the clarification of don't live it in a way that will get you killed or close to being killed. Also, Patrick's delivery of is one of the best standalone moments of the season, putting it above Fools in April. SpongeBob and Patrick go to Goo Lagoon where they have an action-packed sand war complete with full-size sand castles with neat designs, sand knights, sand robots, sand tanks, sand jets that SpongeBob uses to destroy Patrick's castle, and a sand nuke that Patrick uses to destroy SpongeBob's castle. After their war ends in them getting injured, they both admit they got carried away before being tasked with cleaning up the beach after their war pretty much destroyed it, to which they compete to see who can clean faster. This was a very fun episode. episode. Definitely wins action and chaos points for me. Putting it above Reef Blower. Krusty Crushers. As someone who likes watching wrestling from time to time, I can always watch this episode and have a good time with it. I like how SpongeBob and Patrick win against the pro wrestlers through the previously foreshadowed iron bun workouts taken by Patrick to the point where he can do them in his sleep. Putting it above Reef Blower. Also, this episode returned the my leg running gag after a few seasons of not using it. At number 2, we have Ditchin'. I really like this one. When SpongeBob wants to go to a comic book signing by Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy on the same day he has to be at boating school, Patrick convinces him to ditch, which lead to great moments like Mermaid Man telling them to stay on the path of evil.
Stay on the path of evil!
It's stay away from the path of evil.
Oh, what is evil?
Oh, for the love of...
This somewhat cannibal fish who adds on to SpongeBob's guilt of ditching boating school, and the ending of SpongeBob pretty much getting away with his misdeed due to Mrs. Puff ironically getting arrested for ditching jury duty. Just a fun episode, at least for me. Putting it above Grandma's Kisses. Now for the number 1 pick, we have my favorite episode of season 6, Grandpappy the Pirate. I love the plot of Mr. Krabs revamping the Krusty Krab into a pirate ship and getting SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick to play his crew to make it seem like he made it as a pirate to impress his Grandpa Redbeard. And I love how when Grandpa Redbeard finds out that Mr. Krabs lied about being a pirate, he still ends up being proud of him, citing his ludicrous prices, claiming it to be real piracy. Now that's a sweet ending to a really good episode. Putting it above Blackjack. So, there it is, all 47 episodes of SpongeBob Season 6 ranked worst to best. I'm just gonna be honest, this season was worse than Season 5. The best episodes from this season, while good, don't go beyond a C-tier ranking for me, and the worst managed to outdo the worst episodes from the first 5 seasons. And a good amount of them just dragged on for way longer than they should have and didn't make good use of the extended episode count, being 26 half hours instead of 20. Also, I'd like to talk about the visual quality. This is by far the most stiff, on-model, boring-looking season to the point where it took an episode being in HD to make it fun to look at. Speaking of not being fun to look at, stuff like the toenail scenes, Splinter, and overly detailed designs of the characters as they're going crazy were a far cry from the earlier seasons. Yes, it's clear plenty of talent was still there as these designs are very well drawn, but they just didn't fit SpongeBob, and I'm glad the show eventually shifted away from this art direction. Also, Squidward torture. You've already heard the complaints from plenty of people who ain't me, so I'll just leave it there. But that's pretty much all I have to say, and considering I caught a cold during the production of this video, I think it's best to end it here. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on the season, and until next time, this has been Mr. Titan. Have a good day.